From the heart of South Asia to the crossroads of Central Asia, from the turbulent Middle East and North Africa to the power corridors of the West, where narratives collide, perspectives matter and stories connect. This is Beyond Borders. I'm Umar Khalid, but during the course of this show, as we always do in the first 4 days of the week, bring you stories from across the world, in a world that we consider without borders and boundaries, and bring you issues, discuss issues which are extremely pertinent in this changing global scenario. We'll begin with the top stories of the day, or as we call them, region lines. We start from South Asia, where 4 people, including the Assistant Commissioner of North Waziristan, have been martyred in a terrorist attack in Bannu area of Pakistan's northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Police say the assailants set their vehicle on fire after the attack. Meanwhile, a think tank reports a slight rise in militant attacks in Pakistan during November. The Pakistan Institute for Conflict and Security Studies recorded an 80% increase in civilian fatalities. Moving on to the Middle East, where Israel has killed 2 more Palestinians in Gaza, marking another truce breach. At least 342 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli attacks since the ceasefire took effect. Israeli forces have carried out demolition and destruction on residential buildings behind the so-called Yellow Line in the eastern area of Gaza city. Meanwhile, in the West, U.S. President Donald Trump meets with top national security officials at the White House to discuss the next steps as far as Venezuela is concerned. The White House confirms a top U.S. Navy commander has ordered a second round of military strikes on a Venezuelan drug boat. And lastly, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to hold talks in Moscow today to discuss Trump administration's proposals to end the war in Ukraine. The meeting comes after Washington said it was feeling confident about the plan following talks with Ukrainian negotiators in Florida. We'll begin with South Asia, and of course the war on terror is the top story as far as today also is concerned. Afghanistan under Taliban rule is rapidly re-emerging as the global epicenter of terrorism, with credible reports from the UN, human rights bodies and international security agencies confirming that the regime is providing shelter, support and financing to a wide network of militant groups. Evidence shows that more than a dozen foreign and regional terrorist outfits, including the TTP, the IS-KIP, Al-Qaeda, AQIS, ETIM, IMU and Jamaat Ansarullah are operating freely inside of Afghanistan, enjoying ideological overlap with the Taliban and exploiting security vacuums. Recent attacks such as the quadcopter strike on Chinese workers in Tajikistan and the killing of 2 National Guard soldiers in Washington, D.C. by an Afghan origin terrorist linked to Afghan-based networks highlight the global reach of these groups. UN Security Council statements, including from Denmark and Russia, confirm that Afghanistan now hosts 13,000 foreign fighters, with approximately 6,250 TTP militants posing a direct threat to Pakistan and the wider Central and South Asian region. Now, the Taliban regime has either lost control or is willfully enabling this resurgence. Unemployment, poverty and the demobilization of the tens of thousands of Taliban foot soldiers are also feeding recruitment pipelines. As a result, Afghanistan has effectively become a state-sized sanctuary where fragmented yet dangerous militant groups are regrouping, accessing abandoned Western weapons, attracting fighters from Syria and Iraq, and planning operations that endanger regional and global security. As far as Pakistan is concerned, the country that has suffered the most from this cross-border militancy, the unchecked rise of TTP and ISKP from Afghan soil poses a clear and present danger. Unless regional powers develop a unified counter-terrorism framework, the world risks facing a new wave of terrorism radiating out of Afghanistan. I just wanted to give you a little heads up as far as all of this is concerned, because we've been talking about this for so long. But nevertheless, let's now go to our guests who are waiting impatiently to discuss different aspects of this war against terrorism. We've been joined by Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem, foreign affairs expert in the studios, and online we've been joined by Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, who's a defense analyst. Thank you very much to both of my guests to have joined us. I'll begin with you, General Saab. How alarming is it in your point of view for regional security that over 6,000 TTP militants are now based inside of Afghanistan with active logistical support from the Taliban regime?
Like you said, it's a clear and present danger for Pakistan. And as we speak, it's already happening in Pakistan. I think this year has been the bloodiest, starting 2001. That was probably the worst that I saw. And this year has not been any better. In fact, casualties this year are probably more than what we saw in 2001. So what does this tell us? It tells us two things. One, that the region called Afghanistan is something, has become a kind of a hub for keeping this entire region on the boil. When I say entire region, I include all the countries around Afghanistan. It's a landlocked country, and countries as far as Russia, as far as China. Obviously, Middle East is also part of this whole game. Why is this happening? Why is it that Pakistan was the only target till last week? I think when we saw a drone attack being carried out on the Chinese workers who were working on some project in Tajikistan. So what is common in this whole thing is that China's presence in the region, whereas the Western world thinks a lot of itself and wishes to convey or portrays itself as a peace-loving, human rights supporter, everything else. But right now, Afghanistan has become the battleground, and its spillover is being faced by Pakistan. Pakistan is particularly because if you take out Pakistan from this entire equation of it, I try to highlight, whereas the Chinese Belt Road Initiative or other connectivity projects that are concerned, then this whole project, this idea of Chinese economy showing itself in a manner that the Western world didn't do for this region or any other region for that matter. They led with their left foot the power, with the military. China is not doing that. So these two kind of thoughts, different approaches are now at play in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. But as far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan has absolutely no options. We can't allow the country to slide back to the point where we had terrorism at our doorsteps. Pakistan has already shown its resolve. Pakistan has already declared that what it intends to do,
Pakistan has shown its resolve and continued, sir, to show its resolve as far as ending all forms of terrorism is concerned. The fact is that we've tried so many times as far as, talking to the Afghan Taliban interim government is concerned, but it has all fallen on deaf ears. Even the so-called different talks that we've recently held in Turkey and other places as well have really fallen on deaf ears. Nevertheless, stay online with us. Dr. Sundus, 13,000 foreign fighters are roaming freely within the Afghan territories. In your point of view, has the Afghan Taliban interim government either lost control of their own territory, or are they aligning freely with these terrorists?
They don't have any control at all, because the interim government is apparently so helpless. You see, when this Pakistan-Afghanistan negotiations happened, both in Doha and in Istanbul, 5 times they have come up with the certain solutions. But when they called back to Kabul, the interim government is actually failed, or I would say is so, they are afraid of admitting the facts that Pakistan and Afghanistan should come up with the ceasefire and with certain peaceful negotiations, just because of the people over there back in Afghanistan. So the interim government and the so-called foreign minister and all that stuff, they're afraid of their own people back there in Afghanistan on their land.
Their own people, all right.
Because they are not eligible, I would say, the elected government. So, and the Pakistan is actually bearing the cost, not only in terms of human lives, more than 90,000 people, not just the military, as you better know, but the civilians as well. In terms of economic losses, Pakistan has lost 150 billion US dollar. So not only economic losses, and Pakistan has been so resilient in fighting this war against terrorism, but still, and we have received global admiration from the international arena. But when it comes to Afghanistan, so I think this is still like the peace negotiations and ceasefire still hanging in the air, and they have no control with their own government as well. So I think now Pakistan stands that we have come up with this good Taliban and bad Taliban. No Taliban at all is Pakistan stance. I think this ultimate four-headed solution that no Taliban at all can only save Pakistan, because now finally we have learned our lesson, and our like solid and rigid stance is no Taliban at all can save Pakistan ultimately. So I think we have come up with this brotherly neighboring countries and all this in the name of courtesy. We were just
no, but we have really extended our hand for more than two decades. We've harbored them as our guests, millions of them
we were
for
living
decades,
in a fool's
and
paradise,
we've given them all the amenities as well. But look at how they repaid us.
So we lived in a fool's paradise, I would say.
Well, if you say so. General Saab, coming to you, what does the quadcopter attack on the Chinese workers in Tajikistan and the DC incident involving an Afghan origin terrorist indicate about the global reach of terror networks that are based in Afghanistan?
As regards the attack by an Afghan in Washington, that I think we need to look at it a little more differently. So this Afghan was the one who was a trained black operations operative. Those operators who were actually employed by CIA to kill, abduct, and torture common people. He was part of that team. And he was part of the team, and because he knew whatever was happening there, and such people were taken away by the United States of America and the Western world, and Pakistan had to even house some of them for some time. So here is the problem that actually manifests the whole Western approach to you. They come and train the people there, arm them, and leave them for Pakistan to handle. It's not the first time it has happened. But having said that, like I said earlier, the whole problem is that the clash between an emerging superpower and a superpower which is on the wane, and the two are, contesting on a different battlefield altogether. Well, Chinese are pushing their economic power to connect the world together, or at least this part of the world together. Americans find that if this were to come true, we have a problem as far as the Americans are concerned. So Tajikistan attack then again very clearly tells you why the Chinese were attacked. Chinese were working there. Why were they attacked? And also because Tajikistan, housing an Indian air base for quite some time, had to force Indians out. There was a reason why they were forced out, because that is what they thought they could lead to the kind of support to terrorism and to other elements which you saw in the recent Israel-Iran standoff. And Iran suffered terribly because India's ingress into the society had allowed the kind of intelligence which is rarely available otherwise. So what we find now here is that there's a battleground, Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghan people are not part of this. Let's also be very clear. And all these groups that we are talking about, there are about 15 of them. I can't even remember the names. They all have been brought in this region. By whom? I mean,
that is so true. I mean, there are so many questions, General Saab, that need to be answered and need to be answered by the concerned authorities. In this case, it is the Afghan interim government. But unfortunately, they are not in the mood either to respond in kind or to act in kind for that matter. Dr. Sundar Mustaqeem, how should Pakistan, China, the Central Asian countries and Russia and other countries in the region work together to, or respond to prevent Afghanistan from becoming this state-sized launch pad for transnational terrorism?
It is already Taliban regime government, the interim government and all that stuff. until and unless they want to resolve their internal conflicts and matters. No external power can do what we are supposed to do or what we want to do. So I think that all this superpower countries, China and US in particular, they can only force interim government in the name of diplomacy, like what India did. So we can only play on diplomatic grounds. We can only offer them like cultural, through sports diplomacy, through cultural diplomacy, regional diplomacy, so through soft power. I personally believe we can only handle them through soft power, because we have seen that US in 20 years of long
with
tenure.
them, Dr. Sundus, Mustaqeem, look what happened, look how they treated us, and they were using the trade for their, nexus as well.
If they can win war against USA, then what about the other countries? So I think using soft power or non-kinetic means of warfare might work with Taliban, because they're very rigid mindset. They're very not only resilient is a word for a nation like Pakistan, but for them they are very hardcore with rigid mindset. So I think fighting with them will only make them even more aggressive, I would say. So even they are not non-nuclear country, they don't have that weapons and all that stuff, but no one can fight with them through kinetic means, because they will be more aggressive, and in this aggression they won't destroy their own land, but with the neighboring countries as well.
Or if
So
they are doing that, we've seen
power,
that as far as Pakistan is concerned, we've seen that as Tajikistan is concerned as well.
Negotiations and using soft power and cultural diplomacy or sports diplomacy might pave the way.
All right, in your point of view, that is how we should deal with it. General Saab, how do you see the different measures that Islamabad has taken or Pakistan has taken to reinforce border security and of course internal counter-terrorism mechanisms? What more needs to be done in your point of view under the current scenario?
I think we've been defensive for a very long time against the terrorism which was being forced upon Pakistan from the soil across the border. For the first time, we saw that Pakistan went on the offensive, and that is when the Taliban rushed to Doha and asked for a ceasefire. That's not to say that the kinetic power is the only solution. What I think is, and I have been saying it often enough, that the countries around Afghanistan which are bordering actually have the capacity to bottle up Afghanistan. It's a land-owned country. It's not recognized at any level. Therefore, its international rights, it has foregone its international rights. It's time for the regional approach to give a chance to regional approach. The countries surrounding Afghanistan, they are going to be two are already affected. Iran has already offered itself, and Russia and China, we have no doubts about where they stand. So it's time for these countries to come together and create a consensus as to how to deal with this problem. And military power...
We've seen, General Saab, we've seen that happening in Tajikistan. We've seen Emomali Rahman, the Tajik president, also giving instructions as far as this is concerned. Don't you feel Tajikistan and other Central Asian countries should join hands with Pakistan in countering this menace once and for all?
Pakistan has China and Russia, maybe Saudi Arabia. And we could include Turkey and Qatar to the extent that they have tried their best. So these countries have to come together for their own safety, because we have seen two countries, Pakistan has suffered the most, Tajikistan just had an issue, and all these 15, 16 groups, they're coming together. They could be launched not against Pakistan only. Iran is going to be affected equally. And they reach across the land to Russia. That again is a problem. If you recall, about a month and a half back, there was a conference in Russia where the Taliban were given very clearly, they were told that they should control their own territory, not allow the terrorists to work. Why should Russia be hosting this? Because Russia is badly affected. Now, if you look at what is happening in western part of China, across the Wakhan corridor, so China is also affected, not merely because it is present in the scene, because it is bordering the hub of terrorism, so to say. So therefore, regional approach to begin with, so that you can knock sense into their heads. Pakistan has done whatever is required to be done. We have blocked all trade and everything else. But Pakistan is not the only route available to them. There are others who are able to supply to them. And therefore, I think if all countries come together and there's a consensus on how to approach this issue. Part of it could be kinetic, the other could be non-kinetic measures which are required. Maybe the different groups of different factions of Taliban, few of them could be eliminated in one form or the other. Could be, they could be brought together in a kind of a group leading Afghanistan away from this terrorism.
But Turkey and Istanbul, sorry to cut, they failed to do that. They tried to be the mediator, but they didn't do that. I think we can only secure our own land. This is in our hand. We cannot do anything with the Taliban, but we can only secure our own land. So I think that's the best of, if the neighboring countries can secure their land, that's the only way to make them self-protect from the
that's your take. To each country is their own. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa Saab, to have joined us and to have given your very eminent point of view as far as the war against terror is concerned. Let's take you now to the Middle East and North Africa. Israeli forces have carried out demolition and destruction on residential buildings behind the so-called Yellow Line in the eastern areas of Gaza City. The Israeli army has said it has killed more than 40 Palestinians over the past week in operations that are targeting tunnels near Rafah in the Gaza Strip. Israel's genocidal war on Gaza has killed at least 70,100 Palestinians and wounded 170,965 people since October of 2023. Several towns in different governorates have been stormed. 7 weeks into the ceasefire, healthcare workers in Gaza say they are still facing critical shortages of medication and equipment. The UN has described the health situation in Gaza as catastrophic. Israel has carried out attacks on Gaza on 42 of the past 53 days of the ceasefire, and since the ceasefire officially began on the 10th of October, Israel has carried out near daily attacks across Gaza, violating the agreement at least 591 times in just 7 weeks. These violations include airstrikes, artillery shelling, drone attacks, sniper fire, home demolitions, raids beyond the Yellow Line, and detentions of civilians. During the ceasefire alone, Israel has killed at least 356 Palestinians and injured more than 909, with some days like October 19 and the 29th of October seeing large-scale massacres, including the killing of 52 children in a single day. Only 25 to 50% of food and relief supplies have been allowed to enter into Gaza. This and more. I mean, I can go on and on as to what is happening inside of Gaza since the ceasefire, but unfortunately, we don't have that much time to go with it. We continue our conversation with Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem. Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem, the UN calls Israel's health system catastrophic. Hospitals are operating beyond capacity, and essential medicines are not available for the people there. This is not just now, but we thought since after the ceasefire things would be better, but they are not better. What does this collapse also reveal about Israel's intentions post the ceasefire?
See, it's not just about the Gaza, the Iran, Lebanon, and the West Bank. I think that Israeli imperialism is now expanding across the borders, not just because for the Palestinian. I've just mentioned that at the end of October, in just a single day, 100 Palestinians were killed. So I think it's a complete genocide, and we all the world know. So I think this is the hegemony and imperialism coming from the Israel side. And 17 international NGOs, water supplies and 10 have been denied. So what does it mean? They're not providing the medicine, the food, the shelter, the tents from the international NGO side. So what about the Muslim countries and Palestine itself? So it's Israeli hegemony, Israeli imperialism, and they just want Palestinians to just evacuate the whole land. They just want to grab the whole land by hook and crook. That's the way they are expanding their control with every passing day. So they just want to secure the land with Palestinians or without Palestinians. Not even a single hospital has been fully recovered since the so-called ceasefire has been announced. So no proper medication, no proper hospital has been fully recovered. So I think the catastrophe and the winter season.
And the proper food is not even being allowed to enter. 25 to 50% of the basic necessities are allowed to enter. 100% should enter after the ceasefire agreement. Exactly. That is not, the Israelis or the Israeli government is deliberately making the Palestinians suffer.
Die with hunger and with the extreme weather conditions. Winter is at its peak over there. So they just want Palestinians to die without food, without hunger. So that's another way to kill them, with food and with
without food, without water, without basic health supplies.
Killing with hunger means with the killing by not providing them enough food and with these extreme weather conditions. So with kinetic means of warfare or without this, so they just want them to die or just leave the place and all that stuff. So just to grab the whole land, they are doing this imperialism and hatchback thing.
What is the responsibility of the international community now that the ceasefire has been agreed upon and Israel is openly flouting this ceasefire agreement? Shouldn't they be more responsible, more aggressive in persuading or pushing Israel to do the needful now that it has itself signed the ceasefire agreement?
I think as long as Trump is standing behind this, Netanyahu, as long as US is blindly supporting Israel, no one can do anything for them. And China has spoken a lot. China spoke, and US and France, all the rest of the first world countries spoke in favor of the Palestine. But since USA is not as vocal as it's supposed to be, so I think US is the only hurdle, I would say. Otherwise, Netanyahu alone cannot do this.
All right. In your point of view, there needs to be the specific pressure, specifically from the
Donald
United
Trump
States of
and
America.
US. Because they think that there's in their Christianity, they believe that it's in their religion to support Judaism.
All right.
So we cannot fight with this mindset as long as they keep on thinking that it's in the Christianity to support their Jewish brothers. So they obey Jewish as a part of their religion.
All right.
As we whole...
there's a lot of complexity as far as this is concerned, but the main issue is compliance with the ceasefire agreement that Israel has signed, and this needs to be emphasized on Israel. It needs to follow it in letter and principle because it has signed, or else it should not have signed this agreement in the first place. Let's now take you, ladies and gentlemen, to the West. All right. In the West, as far as our leading story is concerned, President Donald Trump has met with senior national security advisors at the White House to discuss the escalating U.S. pressure campaign against Venezuela. The meeting comes as Washington intensifies its accusations that President Nicolas Maduro is facilitating drug trafficking that harms Americans. Allegations Maduro has denied. Now, tensions have risen further after Trump has declared Venezuelan airspace closed in its entirety, a statement that created confusion and concern in Caracas. Despite the administration's stated focus on counter-narcotics operations, the scale of U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean has now raised questions about whether broader action is being considered or not. Since September this year, U.S. forces have conducted at least 21 strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats in regional waters, killing 83 people. With relations deteriorating rapidly, speculation about potential U.S. moves towards Venezuela continues to grow. And this, of course, is extremely worrisome for a lot of people in Venezuela, in the region as well, to see how things are moving forward, because, of course, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered by the U.S. as well. We continue to be joined by Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem. Dr. Sundus, I'd like to understand President Trump's declaration that Venezuela's airspace is now closed in its entirety. In your point of view, does this signal the possibility of a broader military or political confrontation beyond counter-narcotics operations?
Killing 83 people just on the basis of speculation itself is not justified at all. In my dictionary, this is unlawful, because on the basis of allegations, on the basis of speculation, attacking on someone's territory and attacking on someone's military and all that stuff. So I think Republicans have spoken, Republicans in the same way. Republicans actually expressed their concern that why U.S. attacked Venezuela just based on, and as you just said, Monroe is actually continuously denying the fact that we have nothing to do with drug supply and all that stuff, because U.S. thought that they're killing Americans. But what is the evidence they have in their hands? So first of all, they need to provide a certain evidence that yes, this is drug trafficking type of stuff is going on and drug smuggling. So since they have, once they prove, they come up with the proven facts and with legal evidence, only then they can, they might. I think to attack on someone can never be eligible based on speculation is not. So I think world needs to ask, and I'm glad that opposition is quite strong in that in their democracy. The Republicans are asking they're showing their concern, and they are. I'm not saying they're supporting Venezuela's Monroe, but actually they're questioning their own government that why did they do that, and why they're having these allegations that.
So
US
questions are being raised by the Americans themselves. We've also been joined by former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, Brig Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt. Mark, thank you very much to have joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Given that the U.S. military presence in the Caribbean, Mark, far exceeds what is required for drug interdiction missions, in your point of view, what larger strategic objectives might Washington be pursuing against the Maduro government, also with Washington deploying aircraft carriers, warships, F-35 jets to the area? Are there some risks that is expanding U.S. military footprint could pose for regional stability and the energy security?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to keep this in context. There's a lot more going on than simply the deployment of a large military flotilla. There are economic sanctions, there's diplomacy, overt and covert, speaking with President Maduro. There are obviously intelligence activities going on. So although showing a large flotilla and blowing up of drug boats is media friendly, let's keep this in context that this is a comprehensive approach. Second, I think it's important to understand that this is a brand of American coercive diplomacy. It's historical in our hemisphere, as the United States has always tried to maintain freedom and liberty in the countries in the region. So no, the obvious question, are we trying for regime change? Absolutely not. If the regime change comes internally from Venezuela, that's a different story. But I don't think we're going to see an invasion, a regime change, or an occupation as part of this campaign.
Mark, I'd also like to understand how might Donald Trump's undisclosed conversation that he recently held with Nicolas Maduro influence the next steps as far as U.S.-Venezuela relations are concerned, especially as the reports of potential U.S. action continue to accelerate. What's your take?
Yeah, my take is that President Trump is always looking for a deal. Now, of course, he's going to start with his maximalist approach. President Maduro, you have to go. And if President Maduro says, I'm not going anywhere, then the pressure will ramp up. On the other hand, if President Maduro says, President Trump, what do we need to do to calm this situation? I suspect President Trump is first and foremost going to say, you have got to interdict and halt the drug traffic that's coming out of your country and killing Americans by the hundreds of thousands with the fentanyl that's being transported and produced inside your country. And I think the conversation goes from there. But if Maduro is obstinate, I think the United States will push for his ouster, not by external pressure, but by internal pressure.
All right. How does Maduro's appeal, Mark, to the OPEC and OPEC Plus reflect Venezuela's concern that U.S. military pressure is not just about drug interdiction, but about securing influence over the world's largest oil reserves? How do you see this?
Well, I mean, it's clear that the whole issue of the oil reserves is not central, but it is collateral to what's going on down there. It's primarily about drugs, but it's also about the issue that those oil reserves, some of which belong to American companies, are being held hostage by Maduro and is continuing to fund his government, which the United States does not see as legal. I think it's collateral. I don't think it's central, but it certainly is a factor in what's going on in the region.
That I totally understand as far as this is concerned. Another question I'd like to understand, because there's so much to understand as far as all of this is concerned. But before I go to Mark, I'd ask Dr. Sundus this very question. Given Trump's push to massively expand U.S. drilling while Venezuela remains under sanctions, could these tensions also signal some kind of a deeper strategic contest over global oil markets?
It will certainly affect global oil markets. Chances are there that global, at international level, there would be a price hike in oil reserves and all that stuff, because in all around the globe, it's an oil war, I would say. It's not about the tariff oil, it's an oil war. So chances are there that the US dollar there will be definitely effect, and the oil price hikes all around the world, they might go like anything. So tensions are there, and the escalation, because of this escalation and because of this tension, so it will definitely affect not only the value of the dollar, but it might definitely affect the oil price, not only in those countries, but all around the globe.
All right. Mark, coming to you, with Venezuela condemning US strikes as extrajudicial executions, how serious is the risk that this confrontation could widen beyond a bilateral dispute into a broader regional or energy market crisis? That is also what I'd like to understand, because there are allegations that the US campaign lacks evidence and may be tied to Venezuela's vast oil reserves. Are there also some mechanisms that exist to hold Washington accountable for the legality and transparency of its operation in the Caribbean?
Well, on that second question, it is certainly the case that the United States Congress believes that President Trump is operating outside of his authority, his executive authority. Not only have there been calls for him to declare what is happening as part of the War Powers Act, but because of the incidents over the past few days, the reporting over the past few days, there's going to be a careful examination of the U.S. conduct in the sinking of these ships, particularly on the issue of whether non-combatants were killed when it was fully understood that they were non-combatants. So you raise a very important point, and this is the system of checks and balances in the United States. The president is not a dictator. He doesn't have all of the powers inside the government. And I think over the past few days, what is happening in that region is triggering the United States Congress to invoke its legislative power to put the president in check, or at least to have the president explain to the United States Congress, and by definition the United States people, of what his ends, ways, and means are for conducting this operation, this war on drugs that we've been talking about for decades.
All right, Mark, that's an interesting perspective as far as you are concerned, because I feel you give us an outline that is much more expansive and interesting and true to nature than many others. Now let's take you to the talks that could be held, that will be held between Russia and Ukraine. But for the moment, U.S. envoy, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has arrived in Moscow to present an initial U.S. peace proposal that is aimed at ending the nearly 4-year war in Ukraine. He's accompanied by Jared Kushner, with the Kremlin confirming that the talks with President Vladimir Putin will be highly restricted and may continue as long as needed. Now, this diplomatic track runs parallel to another U.S. effort that is led by the Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has been meeting Ukrainian officials. President Zelensky, meanwhile, continues engaging European supporters, visiting Ireland after earlier talks in Paris. Despite this recent progress in US-Ukraine discussions, based partly on a revised document drafted earlier in Geneva, major obstacles remain, particularly over territorial control and long-term security guarantees. European leaders are increasingly trying to reassert their role after feeling sidelined in Washington, while Zelensky warns that Russia may use ongoing negotiations to weaken sanctions and influence European decisions. Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem, with the US sending Witkoff and Kushner for direct talks in Putin while Europe is pushing to regain influence, is Washington effectively shaping the peace process in your point of view without fully accommodating the European point of view as well?
I think, as the name suggests, the Washington's proposed plan. So I think the US that's why US is very optimistic that these negotiations, they will be successful in having these deal negotiations. And Vladimir Putin has been saying that Russia has no issue at all. They're almost agree on the things. But Ukraine is a bit suspicious about this peace plan, because it's mostly in favor of Russia. It's a Russia's wish plan, not the Ukrainians' wish plan, because according to this plan, Ukrainians have to leave most of their territory, and this territorial integrity is the ultimate challenge for Ukrainian in particular. So I think this is more inclined, the plan is more inclined towards Russia and towards USA and less towards the Ukraine. And since February 2022, since Moscow has invaded this Ukrainian land, since February 2022, 1.2 million people have been died, and both the countries, Ukraine and Russia, they are actually hiding this facts and figure that how many people have been killed and injured and also So this is according to the US officials and US reports. So why Trump jump in between? Because Donald Trump has its own plan. He wants to be the mediator, because I think Donald Trump is on a mission to be the peacekeeping mediator all around the world. He wants to resolve all the conflicts like Pakistan-India
conflict.
conflict.
The US can exert the necessary pressure. That we have to admit. If it wants, it can exert the necessary pressure to end any conflict, one or the other, whether it be pressure on Israel or pressure on Russia or even Ukraine for that matter. I mean, the end game must be peace and some kind of agreement that comes between the two sides. Mark, coming to you, I'd like to understand a very basic thing. There are basic differences between Russia and Ukraine as far as this almost 4-year conflict is concerned. Do you feel the US can intervene significantly, aggressively in order to stop this once and for all? Will it be able to address both the Russian and Ukrainian as well as European concerns?
My view is we are not going to stop it for once in a while, once and for all. We can best pause it for a period of time. Look, the fact remains the war aims of both sides are not being satisfied in this agreement. President Zelensky still wants to maintain sovereignty over all of Ukraine, to include Crimea. He wants the Russians to pay reparations for the actions that have been committed against his country, and he wants to join NATO. On the other side, Putin still has his war aims. Zelensky out, Ukraine not in NATO, and the Donbass belongs to Russia. So I think as long as they are that far apart, we may get some sort of pause, but we will not get peace. And candidly, should President Putin stay in power for a few more years, I just think it's not even a peace, it's an interregnum between the fight that started in 2014 in Crimea, restarted again in 2022. Let's be very candid. Russia denies the sovereignty of Ukraine. It believes Ukraine to be a province of Russia. That's President Putin's aspiration. And even after getting over 1 million people, 1 million soldiers killed or wounded, he has shown, in my mind, no enthusiasm to stopping this war until he achieves his war aims. In many ways, to use an issue close to home for you, I think we could, at best, end up with a frozen conflict, such as we see in Kashmir or such as the United States sees in Korea. But candidly, I don't think that we're going to see true peace break out anytime soon.
Mark, Zelensky is warning that Russia may use diplomacy as a cover to ease sanctions. Can Ukraine and its partners, that is the EU, prevent negotiations from becoming a tool for Moscow, in your point of view, to reshape the geopolitical landscape in its favor?
I don't think I see Ukraine's position, either position of Russia or Ukraine being very strong right now. I think the EU may embrace Ukraine, but that does nothing for the security guarantee.
All right. Finally, Mark, as Russia gains battlefield momentum and Ukraine faces internal political and military strains, is the US push for a negotiated settlement strengthening Ukraine's position or unintentionally bolstering Russia's leverage at the table? What's your take?
Understood that the first piece of paper that came out, the 28-point peace plan, was 90% in the advantage of Russia, 10% in the advantage of Ukraine. I think at this point it is at best 75% in the advantage of Russia, 25% in the advantage of Ukraine.
All right. Thank you so very much, Brigadier General Mark Kimmitt, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs, you have joined us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and it will continue to be a pleasure to talk to you in the future programs as well. And thank you very much, Dr. Sundus Mustaqeem, to have joined us for the entirety of the show and to have come all the way to the studios. Again, till next time, as we say. That brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of today's Beyond Borders. It has been an interesting journey today as well. We've talked about the U.S. relations with Venezuela, with and its mediation as far as the Ukraine-Russia conflict is concerned. We've talked about terrorism that is emanating from Afghanistan and not only perpetrating into Pakistan but also in other Central Asian countries as well. And we'll continue to highlight issues that pertain to the region, to the world, and to you in particular in the shows to come as well. Till then, Allah Hafiz. Have a lovely evening ahead.